How we doing? How we doing? Welcome back to another episode of the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. I am your host, Richie, here with my guy, Mr. Mike Zappi, out in San Antonio, Texas. How you doing, Mike?
Man, let me tell you, it was a pretty beautiful thing to be driving through downtown San Antonio, looking at all those saddened Colorado fans tonight. I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty nice to watch.
Yes, indeed. And here in Orlando, Florida area, Miami Hurricanes took an L, and it's a little bigger than losing the football game. And we're gonna speak on some questionable decision making by quarterback Cam Ward that may be detrimental to his NFL draft stock. We're going to hit on the questions surrounding Shadeur as well as Mr. Ward. But before we start there, want to hit on the NFL. Big week in certain games, whether it is chasing down the number one overall pick or whether if it is divisional titles or even positioning just for momentum. I think momentum based, one would say Green Bay and Minnesota definitely fits the bill there. You're talking about a third place team in the Packers that could potentially be getting their 12th win this week. Not too many teams that win 12 games find themselves in third place. And I think that says a lot about how good the North Division has been this year in the NFC.
Yeah, man, it's crazy because if you really look at that, and yes, when you look at the standings and you're talking about two teams that have 13 wins, that being the Lions and the Vikings, and then you're talking about a Green Bay team that is not far behind, sitting there with 11 wins. I mean, we could be looking at a situation where this division could possibly have three teams with 13 wins when the season is done. That's
No,
unheard
it's
of.
truly remarkable. It's
Uh,
truly remarkable. You don't see it very often. I mean, sometimes you have those top heavy years where certain divisions are just stronger. I mean, I recall a 12-4 Indianapolis Colts team losing to an 8-8 Charger team. That was the same year where the New England Patriots were actually 11-5 and missed the friggin' playoffs.
yeah, I guess the next best thing I think of is the year when the Jaguars and the Titans, when the Titans' two losses were to the Jaguars, but of course Titans got their revenge and ended up making the Super Bowl that year. But for there to be three teams with that many wins in the
I
same
gotta
division,
correct you. I gotta
or
correct you on that one.
the other
That
way, the other way.
no,
Thank you.
this is disturbing. And Tom Coughlin, I'm sure this still haunts him. They only lost to the Titans that whole year.
That's right. That's right. The other way around. The Jaguars had two losses throughout the season, both of them to the Titans. Come playoff time, Titans, Eddie George. I mean, they relied on the
Eddie
legs of Eddie
George was a
George.
monster that year, and Castaway talked about it. You know, when Tom Hanks came back into civilization, finding out that his beloved team made the Super Bowl, he's like, "What?" Um, yeah, and just a yard and a half away.
Yeah, Kevin Dyson. If he could only have been Mr. Incredible's wife in that moment.
Yeah, buddy. We're gonna start this up with your guys taking a trip to the city of brotherly love. We've got the Dallas Cowboys at 7-8, showing quite a bit of pride last week in a solid team win over, you know, I think a good Buccaneer team. Now you have the Philadelphia Eagles coming off a disappointing loss, a game where they really ran the Commanders out of the building for the first, I don't know, 12, 13 minutes, 14 minutes of the game. Saquon Barkley was really going off. But unfortunately, um, you lose Jalen Hurts early to the concussion, and Washington just kept hanging around, and they were able to defeat the Eagles late. And while I'm sure the Eagle fan base will play down the loss, and I'm sure even the players themselves will play down the loss, that's not something that I think I'd be able to play down. I don't care if it's Kenny Pickett. I don't care if Jaden Daniels, God forbid, got hurt and it's their backup. It's a divisional loss, and you still keep the door open for a young Washington team who honestly got their first quality victory. But as the game goes, I I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to keep it close early. You're obviously going to be missing some star power because now that the playoffs are out of reach, it's a time to heal. It's a time to start thinking about next year. It's a time to start thinking about how you're going to approach the draft, things of that nature. And you told me off air that CeeDee Lamb will not be playing in this game, unfortunately. I don't think the Cowboys lay down, though. They're still the bird, still the star. I think it's going to be a hard fought battle, but in the end, I think Kenny Pickett makes enough plays to win. But the bell cow, the workhorse, is number 26, Saquon Barkley, who I believe anywhere between a buck 20 to a buck 60 on the ground, maybe add a couple of catches for about 20 or 30 yards. It's going to be the Saquon show for the most part. And I think the Eagles win in a respectable fashion. I think the Cowboys show up. Give me the Eagles 29. Give me the Cowboys 20.
Yeah, I'm looking at this game, and obviously, CeeDee Lamb being shut down for the season due to that shoulder injury that he's been playing through over the last few weeks. It was one of those. Is it really worth risking?
You cannot
Yeah,
risk his health when you're giving him that kind of contract and when he is
and
among the top 3 to 4 receivers in the league.
you can't. And I mean, and we're talking about it carrying over to next year. It like I love watching the fight of my team. Obviously, as this team has gotten healthier, they have been playing a lot better. But it's a little too short lived. Fact of the matter is they're not in the playoffs. They're out of they got knocked out the second Jaden Daniels threw that game-winning touchdown last week. Let's be real. That's what happened. And as the game goes, I look at the Eagles, and the one thing that people are not talking about with this Eagles team is how physical of a football team this team is. And they've been winning it in the trenches. And again, this is going to be one of the games where you're not going to rely on Kenny Pickett to win the game for you. You're going to rely on Kenny Pickett to not make the mistakes for you. And one way to do that is by giving it to number 26. Everyone's talking about will he break Eric Dickerson's record? I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's going to come up short because they win tomorrow or today, should I say? Then there's no point in him even playing next week. But I think this is going to be a much lower scoring game because if there's one thing about Dallas's defense is ever since the return of Michael Parsons, they've been one of the top. Like they've been playing better, but they've been one of the top sack teams that can get sacks, creating turnovers. They've played a lot different. But nevertheless, I think this is going to be a grinder. When I look at Cooper Rush and not having that comfort of throwing to CeeDee Lamb, I think he's going to make a critical mistake or two. I think the Eagles are going to win this one in a much lower scoring game. Give me 20-13 Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, neither outcome or prediction would shock me. I think part of the reason why I have the Eagles almost touching 30 is because I'm smelling a Cooper Rush pick six, but I also might be smelling a Kenny Pickett turnover that either sets up a touchdown or leads to a touchdown immediately because I certainly still don't trust Kenny Pickett. We saw his struggles in Pittsburgh. He had moments in that Commander game where he looked good, but I'm still not sold. And if I'm an Eagles fan, which I'll never be, but if I was, you want Jalen Hurts to get healthy, bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Philly, it's interesting too because let's just go with the assumption they win tomorrow. Detroit loses tomorrow. Minnesota loses tomorrow. That sets up for a classic Week 18 because now Philly cannot sit their starters.
Yes,
Now
indeed. And that
they
opens up the door for Saquon to get the
to
record,
get the record,
to
and then
take
they're
his second crap on the New York Giants.
I mean, it could we could have ourselves a Week 18 because I mean, I'm not going to give my prediction yet, but I'm assuming that the number one seed's going to come out of the North. But I'll be damned if we have ourselves a situation where we have a three-way tie for at 12-3 or 13-3, whatever the case may be, 13-3 going into Week 18. Like, oh man, the NFL wants that.
Well, yeah, I mean, just like adding these extra wild card berths, more teams that stay in contention. for longer, keeps fan interest high. You see it in the NBA now, where in the old days it was 1 through 8. Now you have your play-ins that decide 8 through, 8 up to 1. So it's a lot of excitement. And even in baseball, adding more teams. Professional sports is starting to acknowledge that keeping more teams alive for a longer period of time leads to more stories and just a lot more fun for the fans and the players on the whole.
Hmm.
you know and we're seeing it with college football as well, which was long overdue. This lacks a lot of luster compared to where we were just a little under a year ago. The Detroit Lions taking the trip to Santa Clara. This is an NFC title game rematch. 49ers, just a year to forget in terms of health, in terms of injuries. They opened the season against the New York Jets, and I remember the hype surrounding that game. The Jets have yet to win their fifth game. The Niners have yet to win their seventh game. And yeah, there's that. As the Lions go, I still question Dan Campbell's crunch time decision making. It does legitimately worry me. We saw it last year against these 49ers in a game where I felt that if you just take the points, you would have had to force the 49ers to play a perfect game. It cost them a berth to the Super Bowl, which would have been their first ever berth to the Super Bowl. Last time Detroit won anything in the NFL, it was pre-merger. But this team, it's weird. It's like you lose Aiden Hutchinson for the year. There is a possibility he could come back for the Super Bowl or the title game, maybe. Go out, you get another quality pass rusher, somebody that can hopefully mesh well with Hutch when Hutch comes back, if he comes back this year. Monra St. Brown, not the same blow up weekly fantasy value, but still one of the better receivers in the league. Sam Laporta, after quite a slow start, starting to get his traction. They overcame some off the field crap with Jamison Williams. This team is mentally tough. And now they lose David Montgomery. You still got Jahmyr Gibbs. Much improved O-line over the last couple of years, a point of emphasis with this team. And they've made some concessions to make sure that their secondary was a little more adequate. Do I think they're going to win the Super Bowl, or do I think that right now they're good enough to get there? I'll tell you the truth, Zappy, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. Because if I had to just be unbiased thoroughly and just tell you what I think the Minnesota Vikings are the most impressive team in that division this year because of everything they've had to overcome. Your first round draft pick, 2 knee procedures. Your third round draft pick, tragically killed in a car accident. You get journeyman Sam Darnold, who's done a lot of losing in his career. You pick up Aaron Jones, who gets unceremoniously dumped by the Packers. You really, really go out and get a quality corner who's been through the NFL wars and Stephon Gilmore. And you got a lot of guys that I feel have a lot of chips on their shoulders. So the Lions got to win this game. That's the point. You do not want to leave the door open too much for Minnesota. And of course, you're going to be rooting for Green Bay if you're a Lion fan. But as the game goes, these 49ers are ready for the golf course. Lions are thinking about winning a Super Bowl, their first ever. Give me the Lions 34. Give me the 49ers 17.
Yeah, I think this is a statement game on many levels. I mean, we saw what happened 2 weeks ago with the Detroit Buffalo game. Buffalo winning 48-42, and a lot of it had to do with Dan Campbell again taking those chances. We saw what happened in the NFC Championship game last year with Dan Campbell taking those chances. They had a big lead that they squandered late, and which led to the 49ers on their way to the Super Bowl.
Yes, indeed.
Um, I look at this game like the Lions need to carry momentum. They won a game last week against Chicago. They need to keep the momentum going, not only for next week's game, but for the playoffs as well. The amount of I mean, the Lions were my Super Bowl pick out of the NFC before the season started. I still think it goes through Detroit because I trust. I like their demeanor. I like the tenacity. I love their toughness because of Dan Campbell. Um, What I don't like is the amount of injuries they have suffered, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they lead the league in IR players on that side of the ball. Offensively, David Montgomery could possibly come back if they make a late playoff run. Obviously, you hit on Aiden Hutchinson being possibly coming back for the playoffs, especially. And I would love to see him and Zadarius Smith together, just opposite of each other, wrecking havoc on whether it's Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, whoever that quarterback is in the AFC. But the way as the game goes, yeah, look, the Niners. It's been one of those seasons. I thought it was going to be a season similar to this. I said it before the year started that it's hard to see a team stay healthy for consecutive years, and it has proven to be true. CMC, we saw him what 2, 3 games. Brandon Ayuk held out, suffered an ACL injury. Defensively, they have lost so many starters. And then you also talk about Brock Purdy. Will he does he deserve the 60 million a year, or is he more in the range of 50 to 55? Too many question marks for this team. Like you said, Niners, they're ready to play golf. Lions, they're going to make a statement tomorrow. They are not going to not have their 14th win tomorrow. Give me the Lions. You said 34-17. I'm gonna go something similar. Give me a little bit bigger of a blowout. Give me 37-13.
All right. We're on the Lions. They outplayed this 49er team that was much healthier and fully souped up, like I said,
And
almost a year ago.
and Shed, I love you, bud. I know you love your Niners. You know, you're doing great things over there in Kansas City. But man, I think I was the only guy that said the Rams are going to win the division this year. I was not on the NFC West preview show, but I did say the Rams were my pick, and I have to emphasize that because the Rams are that much closer.
I think the thing that impresses me about those Rams, since you bring them up, is that they are doing it defensively. The
Yeah.
better part of a month, they've been playing really stout defense. They go into a Northeast region, which is a lot tougher for the West Coast team than it is for when the East Coast team goes to the West Coast. At least I think so. So, so yes, I gotta say that you did say that off air. I vouch for it because we talk every day in our group thread about sports, and you're one of the big contributors, even when you're not on the show, in terms of making sure that we're always in the know. You know, I would say at least 50% of the time, you get a story to me right before I get my hands on it, and then once in a while, I'm like, yeah, I just saw that. But we're always working, even when you're not seeing us on here. So props to you, Zappy.
It's because we're trying to improve Derek
We're
Carr
trying
style.
to improve. The
Derek
Green Bay
Carr.
Packers at 11-4 will be headed to the 13-2 Minnesota Vikings. Green Bay will finish third, but what momentum can they build? That's the question here. I said this morning on IG when I was driving into work. I think the morale is what this has to be about. Because last time, if my memory serves me right, Minnesota walked away 32-29 in Lambeau.
In a
Crappy
great
conditions.
game, and don't forget, yes, it was 32-29, but remember, Minnesota was winning 28-3, I believe it was.
Yes, indeed. And they took their foot off the gas and take into consideration that was Jordan Love's first game back because he got hurt in the season opener out in Brazil.
Hmm.
Malik Willis played a couple of porous teams where they were able to kind of limit the playbook a little, and still be okay. And his first game back, he started catching fire and waking up in the second half. First half was one to forget. And that's expected when a guy misses time. But you know, I I've been praising the Vikings. I remember Giant fans knowing how terrible of a year we were going to have going in, a lot more terrible than I thought. And I remember so many Giant fans feeling like this was one of the few games we'd win, which was our season opener against these Vikings. They played a zone defense against us all game, forcing Daniel Jones to overthink. And shouts out to you, Sergio Rodriguez. A couple of years ago, I've shouted you out recently on the show. I'll do it again. You said Brian Dable will be gone, or at minimum, it will be proven that he's not the coach that everybody thinks he is. And you said, Sergio, that he did a great job of coaching Daniel Jones not to make too many decisions. Back to the Vikings. Jones had the best time to release a pass in the league in week 1, but the Vikings read everything. The Vikings took everything away. This is a team thoroughly that Brian Flores has had his handprints on, doing a nice job. O'Connell is a great play caller. He really has these guys believing. Now, having said all that, the other fella that coaches the boys from Lambeau, from a winning statistic, is for a young head coach. His percentages line up with Curly Lambeau and Vince Lombardi. Matt LaFleur is a hell of a coach in his own right. And I feel like these Green Bay Packers, since adding Robert Saleh to this coaching staff, have been much more ferocious on defense. And Xavier McKinney, the former New York Giant, definitely deserves at least a couple of votes for Defensive Player of the Year consideration. I don't think he'll win the award, but I think he deserves a little consideration for the year he's having. I like this Packer team on the whole because everybody's talking about the other two teams. And this is a Green Bay team that has proven in recent years that they are not afraid to go on the road and fuck shit up. Give me the Packers in a very close game. I'm going Green Bay 34, Minnesota 30.
Oh, I'm almost there with you. I like this game. I like this game a lot. Obviously, what we've seen with the Packers is they have had to rely on the legs of Josh Jacobs, and rightfully so. I mean, this guy has fit in perfectly fine in that system. He's taken a lot of the pressure off of Jordan Love. But I look at this game as if the Packers want to win today, it cannot be on the legs of Josh Jacobs. Minnesota has the second best rush defense in the NFL. I think they're going to have to rely on Jordan Love's arm to get this W.
I completely
And
agree with you, Zappy. I think that's what it's going to take to win this ball game.
and when I really look at it, I mean Minnesota, time and time again, when I look at them and I look at this team that's on the after a score celebrating, whether they're doing something off of white chicks or they're doing so like they're out there having so much fun, and to me that is scary.
They're
That
playing for
is
each other, bro. They're
they're
playing for
playing
each
for
other.
each
And
other.
I personally thought that when Kirk Cousins wasn't going to be retained, um, this team was going to naturally fall off a little. And I'm not saying that Kirk Cousins is on the level of a Brady or a Montana or these guys, but he's a solid quarterback. And now, he might have a career renaissance to prove that he's still got something after being
Albert,
replaced by Penix. But the point
yeah,
is, Sam Darnold, the well-traveled guy, Carolina after New York, then he went to the 49ers to back up Purdy. Everybody said potential, potential. He had a real shitty hand when the New York Jets drafted him. And he's
everyone
proven
does.
that he is a winner. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the Vikings approach this situation
Yeah,
in the
and
offseason.
even before the season started, I said, if there's a team to watch out for, it's Minnesota. They have surpassed my expectations. I thought Minnesota was going to be quietly a good team. I didn't think they were going to be this good.
No, sir.
I don't think anyone did. I don't think anyone ever thought that Sam Darnold would be there in the MVP conversation. I don't think anyone ever thought that Sam Darnold would look like what the number 3 pick in the NFL draft should look like. But nevertheless, I think Minnesota knows what's on the line. I think they know that the division comes down to week 18 against Detroit. I think they know they have to keep pace with Detroit in order to win. And even though, man, I want to take Green Bay, but I'm gonna take Minnesota for the sheer fact that I like what Kevin O'Connell is doing up there. I mean, we're talking about one of the best quarterback coaches in the NFL. Sam Darnold has played a great season. And when you have number 18 and Justin Jefferson to throw the ball to, it makes life a lot easier. Give me Minnesota in this game. You took 34-30. I'm going 31-27. A great game indeed. NFC North football, but I just think Minnesota, their run defense is going to be the difference, and they're going to force Jordan Love to win it. I think Jordan Love has a 2 interception ball game tomorrow.
It's a distinct possibility that it could go either way. I mean, I like the point you make about the Minnesota run defense. I think the reason why I like Green Bay in this game is because of the one I stated. This is a morale booster. And the crazy thing about this division, however it plays out tomorrow night, is that the Packers, the Lions, and the Vikings are all capable of catching the right amount of fire to represent this conference in the Super Bowl in the fourth team. One would think probably the Philadelphia Eagles, but I will say this, your Rams pick might look even more genius because they're winning games more so against the way that I think a lot of us expected. With,
Yeah.
with the emergence of their defense over the course of the last month, as I alluded to earlier in the show, and Puka Nacua has definitely jumped Cooper Kupp in terms of importance in that offense. But Cooper Kupp is still a former Super Bowl MVP. And make no mistake about it, Cooper Kupp is very capable of having a blow up game in possibly the best times. And that's what makes this conference so much fun is that, the NFL has kept people intrigued and excited because of the amount of parity. And make no mistake about it, the NFC has plenty of it. But I'm willing to go as far as saying that for the first time in a long time, you can make a logical, credible argument that maybe, just maybe, the NFC is better than the AFC this year.
Yeah, and you know what's crazy about this is with the Packers, the Lions, and the Vikings, the one crazy thing that blows my mind is the Packers can win their last two games of the year. They could be like the Packers are locked in at the sixth seed. They could tie with Minnesota or Detroit with the same record by the end of the year, but no matter what, they're the sixth seed. So, and to me, I think that's dangerous. They have nothing to play for and nothing to lose.
And they can rest also and get the proper amount of reps for everybody and also see what you have in some secondary and tertiary levels of this team because of the fact that injuries are going to happen in the playoffs. They don't discriminate in the playoffs. Guys get hurt. It's a grind, man. It's a marathon season. It's not easy.
No,
Guys are
it's
going to get
really
hurt,
not.
man. Guys drop. Detroit has proven that they are mentally tough. Minnesota has proven that they're mentally tough. And while I don't think Green Bay has the same caliber of wins as those two teams, one thing that I will say is every time I see the Green Bay Packers lose a game, I never feel that they're truly phased. And I do think that on some levels shows a bit of a mental toughness and a confidence within themselves. I saw it way back in week 1 when I thought they outplayed the Eagles on a neutral field. I saw it most recently in Detroit where I thought the Packers got hosed on a call late. I don't know, man. The fact that I could vouch for all three of these teams to go to the Super Bowl says an awful lot.
Oh, no question about it, man. There's no question about it. I mean, we said it before the season started. The NFC North was going to be the best division. You know, we were looking at one point that this division could have had four representatives, but instead Tyreek Stevenson wanted to go mock wash the Commanders fans, and they have never recovered since that play. But you know, like that just goes to show this division is good. And like you said, we talked about momentum. We saw how the season ended last year for Green Bay, taking that momentum going into the playoffs, going into Dallas and defeating my Cowboys, embarrassing my Cowboys, going into San Francisco and giving the Niners the fight before they had to deal with another fight against Detroit. I mean, this North division, in my opinion, we talk about the NFC as being the best. I think if it wasn't for the NFC North, the NFC would not be the best conference.
No, I tend to agree because while Philadelphia has the undefeated record against, in my opinion, one of the toughest divisions to predict year in and year out, that being the AFC North, the Eagles have showed a couple of warts lately that I've been paying attention to. I didn't like the way they came out flat against Carolina. And quite frankly, I didn't like the fact, well, I love the fact because I hate the Eagles, but I didn't like the fact that they were not able to put away a team that they're better than. The Eagles are a better team than the Commanders. That's a game that even if you lose your man Hurts, your system revolves around number 26. They've been getting the ball more to A.J. Brown. He hasn't been as upset lately. But the point is, that's a game you're supposed to win because Washington, while I respect what Dan Quinn is building there, And while I think the world of Jaden Daniels, the bottom line is that they inherited a fourth place schedule, and they're not as good as their record indicates. Next year, they might be as good as their record indicates, or next year, they might be better than their record indicates, because next year they'll have a tougher schedule and they'll have a more complete team because their program is going to continue to improve.
Especially if they land number 11 out of Dallas.
Oh, man, that would be scary. Please, Micah, if you're going to leave the Cowboys, can you just go to the AFC, dude?
Oh, it's not up to him. It would be us trading him.
That would be a weird one in the division, but stranger things have happened. If the ransom is high enough, anything's possible.
Absolutely.
All right. The race towards fantasy immortality. The New York Jets at 4-11 taking on the boys from upstate New York, 12-3 Buffalo Bills. A Bills win here will lock them into the 2 seed in the AFC. Another disappointing Jets season concludes soon. Josh Allen needs the ball. He needs to just ball out. He's in 3 of my fantasy leagues, and I'm in the finals in 4 of them. The other quarterback, of course, as you know in our league, is Joe Burrow. I am not a cocky individual by nature when it comes to these fantasy things. Last year, I thought I had it in the bag after the Dallas game against Detroit. Unfortunately, I didn't. But I will say this, Zappy. It looks pretty healthy right now in the Pops Cheddar in the Sun League. And as the great Mike Holmgren, soon to be inducted Hall of Famer, said, this one means a little bit more to us than it does to any other team. And the reason I say that is because the league is named after my late father. Shouts out John Olson for always having a phenomenal league. We have a nice lineage in that league, and more so than, nice little payout. That league is special to me, and we got a lot of great people in that league.
I'm gonna make it short and sweet. I want to see Aaron Rodgers walk off that field with his head in between his legs, kissing his own ass. I
I mean,
hate
it's quite
Aaron
possible with
Rodgers.
that. It's quite possible, being that Buffalo is due for a good defensive performance.
I not only do I think they're due for a good defensive performance, I think they are due to embarrass, and I'm putting emphasis on the word embarrass the New York Jets, and not only the New York Jets, but embarrass Aaron Rodgers. This I don't think this is going to be much of a game. Right now, there's a lot of MVP talk between 3 names: Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow. Some people would say Lamar's in the lead. I think Josh Allen is in the lead for a couple of reasons. One of them being because the voters are going to say, well, Lamar's won 2, Josh Allen hasn't won any. Let's give it to Josh. But this is the kind of game tomorrow that he could take himself a big lead on the MVP voting. I'm gonna go with a blowout, man. I'm gonna go 41-10 Buffalo.
Uh, yeah, I don't think it's going to be pretty. I'm going to go Buffalo 38, New York Jets 13. Will the Jets? Yeah, give me 13 for the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is an intriguing situation. Like, what the hell is he going to do after this year?
He's gonna go across the streets of the Giants.
Well, I do think it's a possibility. And while you have voiced many times, whether on the show or amongst us talking off air, you don't feel that the future for the New York Giants, unless it's Quinn Ewers, is in this particular draft.
Nope.
I am a person who sometimes believes that history is cyclical. The New York Giants have been burned twice by going to the University of Duke. However, what if they go to Ole Miss twice? Now, I know that you don't have the highest opinion of Jackson Dart. I happen to like some of his leadership qualities. That would be interesting if the Giants got a little weirdly nostalgic and concentrated on other pieces of their team and then went to Ole Miss. I mean, you get burned twice by Duke. Why not take a shot at Ole Miss again if you're not intrigued with Cam or Shadeur? Because, there is this man named Travis Hunter that potentially could play both ways at the pro level, similar to what his coach did when he was in his heyday. And I got to say, man, it would be interesting. And I do believe that the New York Giants acquiring a lockdown corner like a Travis Hunter could really take a huge step towards fortifying their defense, because it's been proven that Tay Banks, while he still might have an NFL career, is certainly not a number one corner. And, Joe Shane has done some bad things and some good things, but I do think he hit correctly on Andrew Phillips and Tyler Nubin. Time will reveal that. But, one player isn't going to fix any team, let alone my team.
Yeah, I mean, I've already told you, I've told you many times, if the Giants, if I'm Mara, I'm looking to continue to build that defense. At what point this year you guys were leading the NFL in sacks?
Yes, we were.
Obviously you need help in the secondary, and there's two names that come to mind, that being Travis Hunter and Will Johnson out of Michigan. I'm not high on Shador. I'm not high on Cam. I know we're going to talk about them here shortly, but I just don't think y'all's quarterback of the future is in this draft. And as far as Jackson Dart goes, I look at Jackson Dart as being the guy that's going to be starting, or he's going to be following in the same footsteps of that of Matt Corral and starting in the UFL here in about 3 years. Like, I just don't think he's a NFL ready yet.
And that's the beauty of the draft, because no matter how much we watch and no matter how much schematically we understand about this beautiful game, you just never know sometimes.
You really don't.
Because never forget, according to some people, the greatest quarterback in the history of this game, Mr. Tom Brady, was passed over by the team that actually drafted him 5 times, round 6. We are up to the race to the 1 pick. I know, just too much excitement. We've got the Indianapolis Colts over the Giants 24-16. I am not speaking for Zappy. These are my personal picks. The Jacksonville Jaguars by a point over the Tennessee Titans 24-23. And I've got the Raiders defeating the New Orleans Saints in the Big Easy 16-13. It's unfortunate that Derek Carr is not available, because I do believe that is a revenge game that most football fans would have wanted to see, just because of the way he was so poorly treated after giving a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to that Raider organization.
Yeah, when I look at these, one thing I'm going to say is my keeper, he's going to have a big game tomorrow, that being Brian Thomas in our Pops in the Cheddar League. He's had himself arguably the best season amongst all rookie receivers. Lad McConkey had himself a great game today, and obviously whatever happens tomorrow with Brian and next week will determine who was the better rookie receiver. But I always said Brian Thomas. I mean, when you talk about LSU, everyone was so focused on the likes of Marvin Harrison, Roma Dunze, and I lost the
Malik
other guy.
Neighbors.
Malik Neighbors, thank you. The other LSU wide receiver. But Brian Thomas was the guy that was the touchdown leader on that team. And Brian Thomas, I'm looking for him to continue to have a big game. Which is crazy, though, that Brian Thomas really took off once Mac Jones took over as quarterback.
You took the words out of my mouth, Zappy. I think that's pretty insane when you really think about that.
Yeah, it really is. But yeah, no, I look at this game, Titans, Jaguars. I agree. I think the Jaguars are going to pull it off, knock themselves out of the run for the one seed. Titans, it might be Cam Ward, it might be Shador, they might go a different route. They might go defense as well. Raiders and Saints, it's so hard to pick that game because both teams are just
That
awful.
bad.
Yeah, and then same with the Colts and Giants. The Colts don't have AR playing tomorrow. They have Joe Flacco, which could be a blessing in disguise. The Giants, they don't want to win. I think they want to have that number 1 pick, so that way, like you said off air, they can orchestrate a trade to trade back, acquire as much draft equity, and build yourself, whether you do go defense or you go offensive line, and continue to build that offense. Because if there's one thing, as we know, is while you have yourself a phenomenal left tackle, that's 2 years in a row he has been able to stay healthy.
Yeah, it's a legitimate worry of mine, and he is a phenomenal tackle, because I've saw him in limited duty this year, given the shortness of his season, really take it to some of the premier pass rushers in this league. There's a lot of reasons why the Giants suck this year, but if you go back to the first 8 or 9 weeks of the year, the Giants' offensive line was working as a fluid unit, not an elite unit, but a fluid unit. And I think after having so many years of just terrible offensive line play, from a humble standpoint, that's what most Giants were hoping for, just some fluidity. I mean, shit. Saquon Barkley is enjoying his first year in Kelly Green, but I'm sure he would have loved to run behind that particular line this year. And, Tyrone Tracy in a lost season having a pretty good year for the converted wide receiver. So we shall see.
No, absolutely. I absolutely. But yeah,
One,
the way
I'm sorry, Zach. Just gonna get one last thing in. Will Johnson, Tennessee Titans, opposite L'Jarius Sneed. That would be something.
shoot, so would Travis Hunter opposite of L'Jarius Sneed. But I've got to think the Titans. I mean, they drafted Will Levis last year. I think they're going to take a reach and draft one of the top two quarterbacks. Even though when I look at Shador and I look at Cam Ward, if this was last year with last year's class, I don't think they would be one of the top five quarterbacks.
Now, if you're the Giants and you go O line at pick one, now granted you could trade back, but if let's just say you stay at your pick, and if you're going O line, which offensive lineman would you take?
Oh, Will Campbell, the offensive tackle at LSU.
I tend to agree. I tend to agree. That would be my personal pick as well. I know that a lot of the fan base would be rioting because of, the fear of being stuck in quarterback purgatory forever and ever. But one thing I will say, and you made a great point off air, and I want to make this clear. I have nothing against Shador Sanders. I have the utmost respect for his father, and I have the utmost respect for their family. However,
Yeah,
you said it off air, pal, and I'm going to reiterate it. Nothing against you, Shador. I think you're a talented cat, but I don't think that you would be this highly ranked if you didn't have that extra on the last name.
and I would have said Kelvin Banks, which I mean he's a guy out of Texas, starting left tackle for the team. But the reason why I went with Will Campbell is because Kelvin Banks' injury that has caused him to miss the last couple of games. That scares me. I'm always against drafting a guy that is hurt at the end of his collegiate career. That's the reason why I'm going Will Campbell. But what I like about Kelvin Banks over Will Campbell is Kelvin Banks has the versatility to play inside or outside. So I don't think he'd go wrong with either of those picks. But honestly, I would go Will Campbell because he is the more natural tackle. Whereas, and you guys addressed the guard position during the offseason pretty strong with that bringing in John Runyon and what's his name. But yeah, I think Will Campbell would be the pick for you guys. So that's why I think the
Yeah,
Giants
Van
are.
Roten might have one more year at guard, maybe. But I would not be the least bit surprised, especially if the Giants trade back, that they get the other guard. Jermaine Illuminor at tackle, a good player, but on borrowed time. Yeah,
No,
the battles are won up front, Zap. You know this better than anyone. You being a lifelong Dallas Cowboys fan, you know damn well that those 90s Cowboys lines, 1992 in particular, in my opinion anyway, the greatest set of offensive linemen on any team in any era in NFL history.
well, look at, I mean, the Lions, arguably the best offensive line in football. They took Penei Sewell over Jamar Chase, and
And I
it's paid
complained about that
dividend.
pick. I complained about that not for the Lions, but for the Bengals, because I said Joe Burrow runs a risk to get injured. And what happens? Joe Burrow missed out on Rookie of the Year because of the injury. Herbert
Yeah,
won it that year.
and he got sacked 7 times today or yesterday. 7 more times. Thankfully, Joe Burrow was able to do Joe Burrow things and still lead that team to victory. But yeah, absolutely. If I was the Bengals, I think that Penei Sewell made all the sense. But Detroit said, "No, we'll take him."
I mean, I get it that the college connection, and I gotta say, I gotta praise Joe Burrow for one thing while we're on the mention of him. The fact that he's willing to move money around to keep his guy T. Higgins happy and feeling the love in that receiver room, it's hard to not get overlooked when the other dude happens to be Jamar Chase. But T. Higgins today was just sensational. And I think Joe Burrow's doing the right thing, man, because he wants to win. He got a taste of getting ever so close to that elusive Lombardi trophy. And as you know, I think the trend's been going on for a little over 2 decades. But first time appearance guys who are the runner up in the Super Bowl have not been back. And I know Joe Cool 2.0 wants more than that.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right. We got the NFC South up for grabs. Carolina at Tampa. Short, sweet, simple. Give me the Bucks 30. Give me the Panthers 10. You're going to see the rare Tampa Bay defensive performance that many have been waiting for, that'll remind you of what they were many years ago, or even a little more recently in the Brady era. Baker Mayfield, this is his former team, the Panthers, where I think Baker refound himself and got a little humbled as well. And I think it did wonders for his career. As the other game goes, Michael Penix just got his first career win. Now he's going to get his first career loss. Give me the Commanders 30. Give me the Falcons 20. Jaden Daniels wins the battle of the two rookie QBs. And I think the difference in the game is that Penix is going to make some mistakes. He's not playing indoors. It's going to be cold. It's not going to be the most comfortable. I just hope that Penix does not get injured. I think they're going to be very aggressive on their blitz packages. And he's had so much at the operating table during his college career. So I hope for the young man's sake that he stays upright enough and doesn't get an injury, but I am a little concerned about this particular game.
You know, it's interesting. Baker Mayfield is 6 touchdowns away from 40 touchdown passes this year. Bucky Irving is 80 yards away from 1,000 yards this season. Mike Evans is 182 yards away from yet another 1,000 yard season, which would mean 1,000 yards in every season he has played. The Panthers, Bryce Young has been playing much better, and he is slowly, and I'm putting emphasis on slowly getting better, where he might just be better than CJ Stroud. Um,
I
this
tend to
Bucks,
agree on that, Zappy. Stroud has definitely regressed.
he has, and I like this Bucks team. I think they're gonna. I mean, nothing against the Panthers. They were. There's a reason why they would have had the number one pick last year if they didn't trade it away. Of course, we know why, because they wanted Bryce Young. But I look at. I think this team is going to set it up. I think Mike Evans is going to get his 1,000 yards, and I look for him to have a humongous game tomorrow from Baker. I think he's going to go off for the tune of 8 receptions, 145 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Give me this Bucks team to win this game 31-13. I think they're a much better football team, and I think they're going to be hungry, especially on how that game on Monday night in Dallas ended. You know, it was I thought they were going to win the game. Never did I think that it was going to be a fumble the way it happened. If he holds on to that ball, Tampa Bay is going to win the game 27-26, but obviously they lost 26-24. I think they're going to come out hungry and pissed tomorrow, 31-13, and I wouldn't even be surprised if it was something similar to what we saw the Chargers do today to the Patriots in the tune of 40-7.
Yeah, similar to Derek Carr, as we talked about off air. Wrong place, wrong time for the Carolina Panthers. And I'm going to also mention that even going back to last year, when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won the division in one of the most boring games ever played, I think it was a 9-0 final, if I'm not mistaken.
That's exactly what it was.
And the reason I remember is because it was championship weekend for me a year ago in the Pops Cheddar and the Sun League, and I lost last year. And I remember that particular game really hurt me. I have a question for you, Zappy, fantasy related in my big money league. Do you even consider starting Baker Mayfield over Josh Allen? Because that is something that I actually have considered.
I'm going to go with no for one reason, because Josh Allen is the dual threat and Baker only passes the ball. So even if Baker passes for 285 to 335 yards and 3 touchdowns, Josh Allen is going to get 3 touchdowns combined, whether his legs, his arm, and he's still going to rush for 50 to 75 yards plus throw for 300. No, I'm going to go with Josh Allen on that one.
And I think I'm going to stick with Josh for the reasons you named, and the other reason is there's always that possibility that the Buccaneers could have the uncharacteristic stinker because unlike the New York Jets, the Carolina Panthers are still playing with pride. And to your point, I don't know if it was seeing Tyrese Maxey with his ex-girlfriend at an Eagle game. I don't know if it was the humbling of getting benched in favor of Andy Dalton, the car accident that the Dalton family was involved in. Fortunately, nobody was severely injured or anything. It kind of expedited Young getting back into the driver's seat. You take the game in Germany against the New York Giants. He gained some confidence in a meaningless game to most, but it wasn't meaningless for him because he was getting his swag back. And since that game, Bryce Young has been playing much better football. And I think that's where it started. I think it started in Germany against the G-Men.
Yeah, and look at sometimes some players need that. I mean, we a clear case, like you said, Sam Darnold. And sometimes it just needs situations. There's a lot of things, and Matt Canales. I mean, he's a good quarterback coach as well, and he's kind of. I think that benching helped out Bryce Young because really he hasn't looked bad with the exception of that Cowboy game. He has not played bad football at all.
In the words of the great Lou Brown from Movie Time Theater in the sports realm, I think in a couple of years we got a couple of all-stars here. No, but
Yeah.
seriously, I like what Carolina's doing, and I'm not used to saying that. And I actually do believe that they're not that far from competing at a better level where they can start being considered in this NFC South. Because I'll be honest with you, Zappy, I do not like the direction of the Atlanta Falcons right now, and I feel bad because Arthur Blank might be the best human being that happens to own a football team.
I agree. The only other guy I could think of is what's his name, the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Uh,
the Rooney family,
the Rooney family.
definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, the Rooney family, very classy individuals. They're actually married into the Mara family, which is somewhat interesting. We're gonna move it along
But
to a great voice that unfortunately we lost over this weekend. Remembering Greg Gumbel. Um, One of the things that I gotta say when you're in that profession, and it was stated by many, it's a cutthroat business. But when you can still be yourself, similar to a Coach Madden, who his death anniversary is coming up as well. If it, him being gone a couple of years, I think it's a credit to not just you, but your family, the people that raised you, and just how you treat people. It's some of the most basic stuff. But when you look around the sports world, I think you really would be hard pressed to find anybody who ever had anything negative to say about Greg Gumbel.
oh, I don't think you would find one person, honestly. I mean, we're talking about one of the voices of sports. We're talking about when I think of March Madness, I think of Greg Gumbel.
Yes,
When I think,
indeed. Selection Sunday, bro.
yeah, Selection Sunday, we're talking about and to me, he is more the voice of CBS than anyone else.
I tend
Uh,
to agree. He made some headway back in the day when NBC exclusively covered the AFC, but he surpassed that as a member of CBS, I must admit.
he he has the greatest call in an AFC playoff game, that being Joe Flacco, the miracle touchdown to Jacoby Jones against Denver, which led to them winning the Super Bowl that year. The Hail Mary pass. I mean, he had an incredible call. And
Shout
then
out Joe Maslak. I was watching the game. Remember Joe, Brock's friend, back from our Rainforest days?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was actually watching the game with Joe Maslak, and yeah, Jacoby Brissett over the top in Mile High. That was something.
Jacoby Jones, not Jacoby Brissett.
I'm sorry, Jacoby Jones. I stand corrected.
But and then And then, who better to be able to call Justin Tucker's 66-yard field goal, NFL record at the time, than than Greg Gumbel. I mean, the guy's been a part of some history. Again, March Madness, a lot of those calls. I mean, it's between him and Jim Nance. They've always had some of the best calls. But
Yeah, and it's wild because Jim Nance retired roughly a year ago. Because I remember we did a show, celebrating his achievements in his career. I have a personal one that doesn't have the same substantiality of the games you mentioned, but as a Giant fan, and also as if you're a Dolphin fan, one that would mean something to you was Kent Graham to a very young Amani Toomer ruining the Denver Broncos' undefeated season.
oh man, I remember that.
That also
Oh,
was Greg Gumbel, who at the time, now let me think, what season was this? If I'm not mistaken,
98.
Zappy, I believe that he was still working for NBC at the time because I believe that was either the last year or the second to last year that the NBC had exclusive AFC rights. Because in those days, similar to even now, if it's an interconference game, the channel that covers the AFC gets it if the AFC is
Correct.
the road team or vice versa.
Correct. Yeah, and it wasn't until even recently. I mean, it was after NBC lost the rights. It was CBS getting all the AFC games and Fox getting the NFC games. But now that they crossed over, it doesn't matter who you belong to.
Yeah, it's crazy, and we're aging ourselves here because if you've been watching football long enough, you remember when the NFC was exclusively on CBS and you had the powerhouse dynamic duo of the late great John Madden and the late great Pat Summerall.
Pat Summerall, man. Oh,
Yeah, those two, you know. But I speak on behalf of not just Zappy and Zappy, you speaking for himself as well, but for Shed, for Bretsky, for Idris, for some of our followers and fans that listen to our show, and just football fans, basketball fans, sports fans in general. We lost a great one. And my sincerest condolences to the Gumbel family, to his brother Brian, to his wife,
Brian.
to his
Yeah.
children.
And you mentioned Brian, and it's crazy that two of the best voices, obviously Brian Gumbel, who's covered more of the stuff on HBO, has had incredible documentaries or stories. We talk about the interview he had with Ice Cube and when they're hitting on rap music, and like it's just crazy that those two parents were able to make two incredible voices of American broadcasting, whether sports or just journalism in general. Like incredible. So rest in peace there, Greg Gumbel. You will never be forgotten. It sucks. It does, but as you and I we're now in our 40s and we're experiencing more of the guys that we considered legends. It hurts. It really does hurt.
Absolutely, because when these kind of things happen, Zappy, it's a piece of our adolescence.
Yeah, a huge piece. A
Absolutely.
huge
We,
piece.
we, we grew up in sports loving families, and when you see these kind of giants, you know, expire, it hurts. And one last thought that I wanted to mention is that, I'm not into the business of comparing because I think that different people bring different strengths. But one thing that I've always found interesting about the dynamic of the two brothers, you made a great point about how Bryant Gumbel um, gets like the bigger interviews and is in kind of like a little more of a diversified lane, whereas Greg was, specific to sports. But it's similar to Marky Mark and his brother Donnie. I happen to think that the possibly overlooked brother might be the more accomplished, might be the stronger one. And I'm not saying that in any way because unfortunately we lost one or anything like that. I'm just keeping it a buck, Zap. That's how I personally feel. But yeah, sad day for that. Sad day hearing that. We've been in this holiday rush. just moving. That's the reason why we did this show so late in the week. We normally knock this thing out on a Wednesday. But just one of the true greats. And he will be missed.
He will be, and I know for a fact this morning on CBS they're gonna give a good piece on him too. There's
Yeah,
no question about it.
I look forward to seeing it in a few hours. It's definitely going to be worth the watch. My man, Jalen Brunson, point guard for my beloved New York Knickerbockers, putting up the double nickel tonight. New York Knicks, one of the hottest teams in the NBA right now, really starting to find their groove. I wasn't so much critical about the move when they moved Dante and Julius Randle over to Mini, acquiring Karl Anthony Towns. I have alluded to on many a show that I want JB, Jalen Brunson, to be the number two option offensively because I think the Knicks are a better team when he is being more of the traditional point guard. But today's the day to just celebrate his point getting and his offensive prowess. I mean, we saw it last year in the playoffs, Zappy. When you're getting into record breaking territory in playoff games with the likes of the greatest of them all in Michael Jordan, there is something very special about your game. What are your thoughts on not just the double nickel, but the trajectory for this Knicks team right now?
Honestly, I think when I look at this Knicks team and I look at everything in the East, I know the Cavaliers have the best record in the East and the best record in basketball, but I honestly think the East comes down to two teams, that being the Celtics and the Knicks. Um, Everyone's like, oh, the Knicks, they're not playing good basketball. Well, it's hard to play the same kind of basketball you were playing last year when you have some turnover. And obviously, it takes time to get the chemistry down when you bring in a guy like Carl Anthony Towns and you trade away a Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. This next team is putting it together. We're in game number 32 to 35, depending on what team you are. And this is usually when you have to get things going for your season. This Knicks team is going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals yet again. I think it's going to be them in Boston. Nothing against the Cavs, yeah, again, yes, they lead the league in wins. I believe only four losses still. I just trust Boston and I trust the Knicks more. I think this Knicks team can make it far. I think the I think we're going to see another Eastern Conference champion this year because when I look at the West, OKC, they're doing great. The Warriors fell off. Lakers, meh. I just think the championship is going to come down to Boston and New York, and whoever wins that Eastern Conference Finals will be the NBA champ this year.
Yeah, I do. Similar to what I said about the NFC, I'm going to say it about the Eastern Conference. Most seasons, not just in recency, I'm talking about in our lifetimes. Most seasons, the Western Conference is stronger. Even if you go back to the years of the Chicago Bulls winning 6 championships in 8 years, no knock on my New York Knicks, no knock on the Cleveland Cavaliers of that era or the Indiana Pacers or any of the other teams the Bulls had to go through in the East, an aging Pistons team, things of that nature. The point is that if you exclude the Chicago Bulls during those years, you could also mention the Orlando Magic, the Penny and Shaq days. The point is that the Western Conference consistently had the better conference, and that's also what makes that what Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and co. did with two different teams, two different three-peats, because you consistently beat the better conference in that era. That would be like when the NFC won 13 years in a row if an AFC team found a way to have enough success during that era.
Well, if there was one AFC team that it took them four tries and they couldn't accomplish it.
And once again, similar to how I talk about my New York Knicks and the haunting of Michael Jordan and Reggie Miller combined, we got Miller half the time, but the point is he cost us quite a bit. We never got Mike, and when Mike walked away, the Bulls still almost got us. That's when Scottie Pippen played the best basketball of his life. But getting back to front and center on this, I do believe the New York Knicks have an opportunity to win their first championship since the 1972-73 season. And the Boston Celtics have to do something that's very difficult. Repeating is not common in today's NBA, and that's already working against them. While I do think Cleveland deserves praise, I'm not convinced that when the time comes that they will be able to do better against the Knicks than they did a couple of seasons ago. And I like Donovan Mitchell, but I don't trust Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs. And one other thing I wanted to say, it would be rather interesting if the New York Knicks ended up staring down the Oklahoma City Thunder after a beloved member of the team, Isaiah Hartenstein, took the money because the Knicks were in a weird situation where they could not offer him more than OKC, even if they wanted to. And, he left some good friends to go over there, and I don't blame him. He got paid handsomely. And while I am happy for Hartenstein's contract, I do believe that the Thunder paid too much. And I do believe that Hartenstein came up mighty small in that game 7 at the Mecca last year against the Indiana Pacers.
No, definitely agree with you. Definitely agree with you.
But last year, where I saw the Knicks really take the jump for the better, was actually this time of the year, right after the new year. So I am excited. But I still want to see Karl Anthony Towns ultimately, consistently as the number one threat on offense. And what makes me happy about this Knicks team, Kendrick Perkins doesn't see it right now, but I think he's wrong, is that I think that they have the right amount of depth where you have a guy like an OG Anunoby who on a given night could throw down 30. You have a Mikal Bridges who's coming off a 40-point performance not too long ago. This is a team that has a lot of different guys that can fill up the basket. If there's one place for improvement that I would like to see on this team, I like Deuce McBride, but I'm not in love with Deuce McBride. And I would like to see the ascension of Tyler Kolek, who I thought did really well in the summer league, eventually become that backup for Jalen Brunson.
And that's what I was going to say. I was like, if there's one thing I'm worried about with this Knicks team is who's going to be the backup to Jalen Brunson. And I think you guys are going to make a trade, honestly. I don't think he's on the team right now. I think you guys will
I
make a
tend
deadline
to
deal.
agree. I'm not going to lie, though. I'm happy that CP3 is with Wemby. I think that it's going to be great for his career development and just learning how to be a pro's pro. But I got to admit, bro, I really wanted Chris Paul to close it out in New York.
It's still possible.
Yeah, you're not lying. It might not be this particular year because I believe he was only inked to a 1-year deal anyway.
And that's, I mean, yes, while the Spurs are right there in the playoff or play-in category, they could very easily trade Chris Paul.
Yeah, it's possible. And we'll see. And that was quite the classic a few days ago. Christmas Day
Oh,
game.
42
Wemby had a
points by
monster
Wemby.
performance.
Yeah, dude, that guy is going to be running this league in a few years.
Yeah, and he's an easy person to like. He does things the right way, similar to the lineage of Spurs big men going back to the Admiral David Robinson, as well as the big fundamental Tim Duncan. We're going to close this out with some red flags, one kind of obvious, one more potentially. We're talking about Cam and we're talking about Shadeur. We're talking NFL draft. We're talking about potentially the two most sought after quarterbacks in this upcoming NFL draft. Zappy, I really don't like what Cam Ward pulled tonight.
No, Cam Ward, look, you play the game to win. You play the game for the men to your left and to your right. You play the game for your brothers in arms. And to sit out there or go out there, pass a touchdown, and pull yourself out because you made this an individual statistics that much important than the the name on your jersey is the more important one is the team name, not the one in the back of your jersey. And in college football, not many teams have the names in the back of the jersey. But for Cam Ward to go out there and pull himself out of the game today because he got the all-time touchdown record, and what a slap in the face to So many great Miami Hurricane players. I mean, we take it back to the 80s and 90s. Michael Irvin, Warren Sapp, Ray Lewis. We take it to the 2001 team that had so many great players. I mean, one guy is rolling over in his grave, and that being Sean Taylor. What I mean, if I'm an NFL franchise right now, I am not drafting you. You made it. What you said is the game is not bigger than you. That you are bigger than the game, and he is what's wrong with college football right now. Like I can't believe I witnessed that personally. I mean, you take yourself out of the game not because of injury, not because of this or that. Oh, because I got my record, I'm good. Who cares if we win this game? Like this is the last time you're playing with your brothers.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
what
if you
message and what kind of form, in any way, shape, or form, of showing a little grace to the educators, to the many coaches, to the many teammates? What about the teammates who were playing their final game, the guys who aren't going to get to the next level? You took a shit on all those people that invested 4 years of their lives into you.
yeah, those offensive linemen. I mean, yeah, they had an opportunity to win the game. If Cam Ward finishes the game, Miami should have won. Iowa
I'll
State
tell
was
you
not the
right
better
now,
team.
I will be livid, truly livid, if my New York Giants draft this kid. And I already wasn't too keen on him for a litany of reasons, but just to make it more simple, I would be mortified if the New York Giants went back to the ACC after the nightmare with Daniel Jones.
Yeah, and Miami. Well, let me rephrase that. Cam Ward, since he is Miami, since the team revolves around him, apparently, you should have won the games that mattered this year. Miami was the clear cut favorite to be in the playoff this year.
What I
They
don't
were
even think he was a better quarterback than Kyle McCord when Cuse beat him down.
no,
And if the
no, and
Giants were crazy enough to draft Kyle McCord, I would support that more than Cam Ward right now.
it's crazy. It's like we look at Caleb Williams last year and his antics on the sideline, running into the stands, being held by his mom. I was very disappointed in that in his character last year. This tops it by far, by a long shot. I mean, Cam Ward, how disgusting! Like, and people sit there and say, "Oh, well, he didn't have to play the game." Correct, he didn't have to, but he did.
Yeah,
He
and me and you
suited
didn't have to go to work today either.
right, and he suited up. He suited up, and he told everyone, "This game does not matter to me. Just my individual statistics are what matters."
And it is disgusting, and you chose the right words, because the one that pisses me off the most, more than the head coach, more than the university itself, the program, whatever have you, this is not the era to pull that shit in college football, because there has to be a happy medium. For years and years and years, a lot of the players, rightfully so, bitched, moaned, and complained about their likenesses being used in the video games. That's why NCAA was off the shelf for so many years, making money off kids, not having enough money for food, struggling with just getting by. In that regard, I'm glad that they are making money now. It also eliminates the illegal parts of it and the middlemen and tanking and all kinds of other crazy shit that could go on. And we've seen the ugly as well as the good and the bad. But this is just a really like an awful, awful look on Cam Ward's part. No excuses. And I'll be honest with you. If I was one of his offensive linemen, I'm not 100% sure that I wouldn't approach him on some next level stuff, putting up the hands, because the offensive linemen, the sacrifices that they make for their quarterbacks and the way that they protect their quarterbacks, to do that to your boys is all kinds of fucked up.
No, and what's the worst part about it all is you talk about the offensive lineman, you talk about the team in general. This Miami team had one specific player that he played 9 years of 9 years. I said that 9 years of college football, and his last game today came to a loss, and that's Cam McCormick. I mean, the guy was on the sideline crying his butt off
And it just shows you
as they
two
lost today.
completely different spectrums.
It really does. I mean, he's crying his butt off because he suited up one last time, and you get Cam Ward to slap you in the face and say, "Hey, I know you gave 9 years of your life in college, which is unheard of. Guys like Chris Winkie come to mind, and I don't even think he gave that much.
Right,
But
right.
it's like, what about those guys that have sacrificed so much? And I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I really do.
The
And
last
but
time a singular athlete's actions really got me heated on the level of just being so out of touch and so fucking entitled, sorry for cursing, but not really, was when Evan Neal pulled that shit with
oh
the
yeah,
Giants fan base.
the
And
fans,
Saquon
yeah.
Barkley, who was still a member of the team, checked his ass righteously and was like, let me tell you something, bro. These people are going to be here after you, and they were here before both of us, and they're going to continue to be here. And, basically, insulting working level people.
Yeah, and Evan Neal hasn't exactly, to this day, put himself up for a conversation of a great NFL lineman. I mean, we've seen
I
him.
understand that in moments of frustration, young people say stupid shit. And I'm not above that because when I was younger, I have done some things that are definitely regrettable. But the bottom line is that you just can't say that shit, especially at the next level. And
But
as far as Shador goes, the reason why I so much as mention him on the red flag list is not so much necessarily with me about the character aspect of it. It's more about the risk factor because you and I, as well as our other guy, Idris, are all in agreement that this particular quarterback class doesn't have much on last year. And you might find some gems in later rounds.
yeah, and if there's one thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to tip my hat off to Shador, is he finished the game. He played today.
He
He
didn't play his
played.
best game, but he played hard.
He played. Yeah, and he was out there with his brothers and his brother Shiloh Sanders. He was out there with the Heisman Trophy winner. They were out there playing their final college football game, not for individual recognition, not for statistics. They were out there to play for each other. And again, yes, 16 for 23. People will say he had a good game. He didn't. And what worries me about Shador is the big worry for me is a lot of his big games came against lesser competition, but in the big games, I don't want to say use the words disappeared, but he never proved it. And this is such a weak quarterback class where in last year's draft, he's not getting drafted ahead of Bo Nix, Michael Penix. He's not getting drafted ahead of Jaden Daniels or
Yeah, that's
Caleb
kind of where I'm
Williams.
going with it. I believe that both these young men probably get drafted in round 2 if they were in last year's draft.
Maybe even later. That's the sad part. Is maybe later. Shador Sanders made a career off of his name, and while he did back it up, going from an HBCU university in Jackson State and coming to Colorado and putting up good numbers. Don't get me wrong, good numbers. Like he just, to me, I don't think he is NFL ready. If this was back in the day, he needs a Jordan Love type of situation. He needs to get drafted by a team and ride the bench for 2 to 3 years.
Wait a minute, pal. You said a Jordan Love situation. Does that mean that AR8, soon to be AR12 yet again, because I think he goes back to number 12, will Aaron Rodgers just walk across the hallway and put on giant blue? Or do you think the mentor will be a less expensive option, like maybe a Jacoby Brissett, maybe a Jameis Winston, or maybe somebody in the middle like a Sam Darnold?
Whether it's Kirk Cousins, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, whether it's whoever, if you draft someone with the number one pick, they need to be playing by week 8. If you draft someone in the top 10, especially a quarterback, and Michael Penix is another example, they need to be playing by week 10. Or maybe even later if
And it
you're
goes
in the
to show
playoff
you
race.
it goes to show you that this was a kind of a turn of the century thing that was more prevalent because an example that I personally remember is when I thought Kurt Warner got unceremoniously benched for one poor game when I felt that he gave the New York Giants a chance to be a wild card team that might mess up somebody's day in the playoffs, and the Giants sacrificed the second half of that season to get Eli's feet wet. A year later, they were rewarded with a division title, and in his fourth year, third as a starter, full-time starter, they were rewarded with a Super Bowl victory. And we've seen it with other programs too. Patrick Mahomes sat 1 year. Aaron Rodgers sat 3. Jordan Love sat 3. We've seen it.
Yeah, but the one big difference I will say with Aaron Rodgers, Eli Manning, to that of Jordan Love is Jordan Love was drafted in the 20s, Rodgers was too, but the CBA has made it much different. With these
Yeah,
new
because when
quarterback
you're on those rookie
contracts.
deals and you're not getting playing time, it changes the perspective of and just the whole ceiling of it.
No, absolutely. And that's why, again, yeah, you get the 5th year option. Now we're going to see soon players are trying to get paid by year 3, or at the end of year 3, that's the direction we're going. And it doesn't help now with how we have college football with the NIL deals.
Nah, man. I mean, the college football has drastically changed so much in the last 5 years. With the transfer portal, with the kids now being financially, I wouldn't call them financially. They're making some money now. You can get can you imagine what Johnny Manziel would be now in today's football? The way he was such a star, or even a guy like a Tim Tebow, who has made more money practicing his faith than he ever did on a football field or a baseball diamond.
Yeah, I mean, dude, look at what is his name? Hold on, it'll come to me in a second. It'll come to me here. Bryce Underwood, the guy that the number 1 player in the country, was signed with Michigan. Why did he sign with Michigan? Well, they needed the likes of Dave Portnoy to fork over a couple $1 million, but a $10 million NIL deal? I mean, come on now. This is an 18-year-old kid getting a $10
Yeah,
million
bro, it's
dollar.
it's pretty it's pretty crazy. I mean, and I say to myself, when you think about some of these former college stars, like what would Bo Jackson be worth? Or what would
What
a
would
dude like
Vince Young, Reggie Bush, I mean Herschel Walker? Come on now.
yeah, the list goes on. I mean, you've had a Charles Woodson. Can you imagine Charles Woodson?
Yeah, and that's the crazy part is Cam Ward, going back to him, and Shador, they both are in the top 5 in NIL contracts. And one of the guys tried to play and show his worth while the other guy said, I'm good.
Yeah, it hurts on a lot of levels, being former players at different levels, at whatever level you've ever played this game. The bottom line is that that's a no-no, because when it comes to family, football is family in that regard more than any other particular sport. Because as my late father often told me when he coached me going all the way back to Pee Wee's, he said it. He said, it looks easy on the television, but the reality is that 11 guys all have to buy in on one play in order for the simplistic stuff to even make the bigger stuff happen. And quite frankly, it is not that easy. And football, I mean, all sports are a grind, but in the team aspect of it, football truly is the ultimate team sport. When you pull that shit, it's just beyond disappointing. I'm gonna take it a step even further. Everybody likes to dissect, especially after the series that came out about the late Aaron Hernandez, who his brain was weighted and looked at with the CTE and things of that nature. And say what you want about his antics off the field, and sadly he was indeed a serial murderer. But even Aaron Hernandez, as a player, you would really, really have to take his legs out completely for him to not want to get on that field. Because say what you want about him off the field, even another guy with a controversial past, like an O.J. Simpson. Come on now, you think you think one of those guys is gonna quit on their team? No, they're not, pal. They're not. And I want you to think about what these men did off the field that tainted their whole reputation, and what he did on a football field. You get where I'm going?
Yeah, 100%. These guys, I mean, they gave their all on the field. But what they did off the field, we can't. I will
Yeah,
never
and I believe in
judge.
separating the two, not because I want to absolve people's transgressions off the field. It's like anything else. Why do we know who they are? Because they
Correct.
played the game, or same thing with entertainers, same thing with actors. You think I give two shits if Robert De Niro is a Democrat or a Republican?
And you know what's the perfect example of it all? The perfect example of this argument we have right now. I say argument, but conversation. Pete Rose. I don't. Yes, what he did sucks,
Reprehensible what he did.
but
However, you're insulting all our intelligence if that man isn't in Cooperstown.
that's
But
absolutely it, man.
unfortunately, Rose signed something that had him bounded forever to never be inducted into the Hall, and that's something that rarely gets spoken on. And when we talk about the Hall, final thought: is Eli Manning a first ballot Hall of Famer? I think you could make clear and concise reasons as to why he is and why he's not. I'll give you the quick negatives: the career 500 record, only 4 Pro Bowls. Those are two glaring ones. And 244 interceptions is a lot. I will say that. 366 touchdowns, pretty freaking good. When he left the NFL, he was 7th in touchdown passes, and he was in the top 10 in every statistical metric of passing the football. And I do want to remind folks that the New York Giants during the Eli era were a run-first team. No Hall of Famer teammates. However, I think Tiki is worthy of the Hall. One Hall of Fame teammate overall, which was Michael Strahan. He played defense, of course. It's a tough one, man. And I'm not going to overvouch for him because I love Eli and because I love the New York Football Giants. But one thing that I hope, if he does sneak in on the first ballot, is that people are not just going to be like, oh, it's because he's a Manning. I mean, there's other things that Eli has done that I think from a clutch level, the list is so short. You're talking Brady, you're talking Mahomes, you're talking Montana. From the clutch level in the biggest game of the year being the Super Bowl, this is a guy that owns the single postseason record for most passing yards, that being 2011. This is a guy that really put on an undrafted, unknown Victor Cruz into NFL just blow up mode, where he was one of probably the top 5 most popular players for a minute as
Well,
a
he had
member of
that
this
dance.
organization.
When you got the
Yeah,
salsa dance after every touchdown score, it's going to get you
but
recognized.
it's gonna be a complicated argument, and I'm not gonna be offended if Eli doesn't get in on the first ballot.
I
There's a
and
there's a part of me that doesn't want him to get in because I don't want him to be crucified for people overlooking what he did accomplish just because he's a Manning. And as far as the 4 Pro Bowls go, to be fair, he sure had some great quarterbacks in that conference during his 15-year career.
yeah, and I've talked to you many times about this, and I've said, do I think Eli is a Pro Bowler, or I'm sorry, a Hall of Famer? Yes. Do I think he's a first ballot? No, I don't. Will he? And I've said it. I'm one of the people that believes that he gets it because of his name. But when I look at the final 15, he's the only quarterback. I think he's going to get it for that reason alone. He's the only quarterback. You know,
But I hope
playoff.
people could at least educate themselves to knowing that sometimes timing also plays a fair hand. And, Deion Sanders made a good point. While some people might view it as overly arrogant, but he still makes a good point. He said there should be different wings of the Hall of Fame for different talent levels. And I don't think it was that he was trying to diss Tony Baselli. I think it was Tony Baselli, who's obviously worthy of the Hall. The point is that certain players transcend the game, where other players are Hall of Famers, and then you have great players, and then you have the Hall of Very Good. There's a lot of ways to break the shit down. But to me, I agree with you that Eli's a Hall of Famer.
But if he does go first ballot, I'm certainly not going to feel that he was gifted it off of the name, whether that's true or not. Because at the end of the day, I do believe that bringing down the most successful dynasty for the longest duration in NFL history does indeed hold a lot of weight, no matter what they say. And the reason I say this is not just because of Eli. Does Terrell Davis make the Hall of Fame in a 7-year career if he's not a back-to-back Super Bowl champion?
Well, there's another guy who's in the seniors finalist that I'm pretty sure had a 7-year career.
And that's what we call a segue, kids. Rip it, Zappy. Go ahead.
And many people say arguably one of the greatest receivers to ever play the game suffered a very gruesome injury. And because of it, because he doesn't have the back-to-back Super Bowl wins, because he doesn't have the John Elway there by his side. I mean, he had Brett Favre, but Sterling Shepard, why isn't he in? If you're going to give Terrell Davis
Sterling Sharp.
I mean, what did I say? Sterling Shepard? Yeah, Sterling Sharp. Thank you. Shannon Sharp said it himself. I'm not even the best Sharp.
And that was one of the absolute best Hall of Fame induction speeches I've ever seen, because it was so real. And I'm sure you know this, Zappy, but I mentioned this to my mother today when she was talking to me about the Hall of Fame and what I thought. Shannon, after defeating the Green Bay Packers in the first of his 2 consecutive Super Bowls, ultimately he won a third one in Baltimore, he gave that ring to his brother Sterling, because I think at his core, Shannon knew that it should have been the 2 brothers on each sideline.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's sad. It's sad what happened. And I'll tell you the truth, Zach, when I consider that he only had Brett Favre for a short while, and Magic Man Majowski was coming off a Pro Bowl season. Oddly enough, a good friend of the show, John Olson, was actually in the house seeing Brett Favre's first appearance for Green Bay in a real game. That was a comeback victory over the Cincinnati Bengals. John and Josh were in the house for Brett Favre's first victory.
Hey, I'm gonna throw this at you, and I'm gonna call out the hypocrisy of the NFL. When it comes to time for NFL Hall of Fame voting, playoff / Super Bowl success is not supposed to be considered. What's supposed to be considered is what you did in the regular season, statistically. I mean, for so many things. So, with that being said, if that's the case, then you cannot tell me that what Terrell Davis did in 7 years is a lot better than that what Sterling Sharp, not Shepard, did in 7 years for the Green Bay Packers.
I'll be honest, Zappy. Jerry Rice is the creme de la creme of any and all receivers in any and all eras. But for those 7 years, Sterling Sharp was a very close second.
Oh, definitely.
And there's something to be said about that, especially when you consider that the caliber of quarterbacks that he had, with the exception of having Favre for that short while, paled in comparison to people that threw the ball to Jerry Rice. Because I'm not just talking about the obvious, the Steve Youngs and the Joe Montana. I'm also talking about, the other guys. He had Rich Gannon with the Raiders. He had Jeff Garcia with the Niners. Jerry Rice is a wonderful player, and I'm not going to ever discredit him for anything. The guy was phenomenal. But let's be real. The guy always had a pretty good quarterback. I mean, shit, even Steve Bono wasn't that bad. Elvis Gerback wasn't that bad.
Rich Gannon wasn't that bad.
No, Rich Gannon was he's one of those guys that if he had a few more years, be like, all very good, but pretty damn good was Rich Gannon.
Yeah, no, definitely, man. And it's gonna be crazy, and I look at the 15 finalists. Here, I'll put it to you this way. Antonio Gates was first ballot last year, did not make it. He's gonna get it this year.
That's egregious in its own right.
And I thought Antonio Gates should have got it as a first ballot. DeMarcus Ware, he didn't get it as first ballot. He got it his second year. And he, in my opinion, not because of personal bias with the Cowboys and all, but because I think he was one of the greatest edge rushers to ever play the game, he did not get first ballot. And that's why I don't think Eli gets first ballot. Now, then I look at the other guys like Darren Woodson, long overdue. I hope Darren Woodson and Sterling get in together because it's one of those that they are both more than deserving of.
And they were on the opposite sides of the fight because the Dallas Cowboys were in the middle of a dynasty when the Green Bay Packers were starting to ascend. And, you know, I'm just going to throw this out there. If Sterling Sharp is healthy in that epic NFC title game where the Cowboys won, would the Packers have pulled the upset? I'm not sure. But I'll tell you what, I wish I would have seen Sterling Sharp on that field because if anybody deserved to be on that field, it was him.
You know, what kind of slap in the face would this be? One of the first timers this year also had a shortened career, that being Luke Kuechly, one of the finalists. If Luke Kuechly gets in before Sterling Sharp, if he gets in before Eli Manning, that's going to be a mess.
And that kind of rages back into my original point about the Hall of Hypocrisy. We talk about this shit with baseball a lot. You know, they're worried about Pete Rose gambling. But up until just a couple of years ago, they finally had the common sense to include the great Negro League players who didn't have the choice of not playing in MLB. You know, and that's the thing that burns my ass. It's that they pick and choose what they want to police and what they want to make moral, when not including people of color was the most immoral, especially in those times in this country. And that's what makes a guy like a Babe Ruth so damn special. Because Ruth always wanted to test his might and see how good he was, and often contributed into competition in the Negro Leagues. And, you know, in order for inclusion during those times, it takes some brave people to cross the lines. And Babe Ruth, I give him a big ass shout out for that.
No, definitely, man. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, we'll get the Hall of Fame notices here in during the playoffs, NFC or championship weekend. I mean, there's so many guys that are deserving on this list. Adam Vinatieri, should he be in that position?
That's another guy, because we say to ourselves, well, we don't exactly, look into all the Super Bowl stuff. And if you exclude the Super Bowl stuff, Adam Vinatieri is not a regular season guy on the level of a Morton Anderson, a Gary Anderson, a Justin Tucker, etc.
Or Martin Gramatica.
Automatic Grammatica, the most ridiculous injury, and I would say a close second is my man Gus Farrat knocking himself out. Last thing, Zach, before we get out of here, Corbin Burns is a member of the Arizona Diamondbacks now. I think it weakens the Orioles. You don't feel the same way with weakening the Orioles, but what is your final thought on that?
I mean, we know right now the team in Major League Baseball, the team to catch, they are the defending champs, the Los Angeles Dodgers. They're only going to be stronger next year, and if you can't, you got to slow down their hitting. We saw what they did against the Yankees in the clinching game. They're down 5-0. Their bats got going. It took a couple of errors by the Yankees. Nevertheless,
the worst inning in the history of the World Series, but yes, continue.
You need strong pitching. And this rotation with the D-backs already had the likes of Zach Gallen in there, Jordan Montgomery in there. It had Eduardo Rodriguez. It had Morel Kelly. And now you throw Corbin Burns, who is a true ace. I mean, he's a Cy Young winner. He was the all-star starter before. Like, this is, to me, gonna be a great rotation. But what hurts this D-backs team is you put so much emphasis on your defense that where's the offense going to come from? I mean,
and that remains to be seen. And as you know, Christian Walker's now an Astro, and he was one of their big run producers. You still have, in my opinion, a guy who's just going to continue to get better in Corbin Carroll, but they need some help. And I'm thinking, if these guys are kind of around the Mendoza line at the All-Star break, kind of lurking in that wild card race, they might be deadline dealing. They might be picking some bones off the Rays or teams that are known to trade talent at the deadline.
And I don't think they're done. I think you make this kind of move in hopes of being able to lure a Pete Alonso or Anthony Santander over, because if they can get a first baseman over there, they're right back in the thick of
I
things.
would love to see Santander go to the friggin' the D-backs, because while me and you have a difference of opinion on how this AL East is going to play out, I have a strong opinion that the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox are actually going to be duking it out for 1 and 2, whereas I think the Orioles, although on paper I think they have quite the talent, there's something missing in Baltimore, and I haven't.
I think we lost Rick.
I kind of fell out of the room by accident there.
Okay, I was like, I thought your phone died.
It's close, actually, but we're wrapping it up. My final thought on this is I truly believe that the Baltimore Orioles are finishing third, Yankees and Red Sox going for the gusto in the East. And we're going to expand on this conversation on a future show, but no question about it. What the Diamondbacks are putting together right now is the way that they won their lone World Series, and that's by having just phenomenal pitching. But we'll get on it even deeper on a future show. For Zappy, I am Richie. Thanks for hanging. After all these work hours, I just need to rip on some sports, and I think we accomplished that here. Zappy, as always, a phenomenal job.
Yeah, and to everyone that does tune in, Happy New Year. Everyone be safe. Don't blow your hands off like JPP.
Woo!
And definitely do not get behind the wheel and do anything stupid.
Yeah, please. We want you all here for the next show. We love you guys. Happy New Year.